Not in 138 years, since Wilhelm Steinitz was crowned world chess champion in 1886, the first official one, have we seen a reigning world champion, Ding Liren in this case, dominated in such brutal fashion. Every time Magnus plays him, world number one, he destroys him right now. This is a game of positional beauty. Magnus with the white pieces. It's Astana, Kazakhstan, the World Rapid Team Championship. Magnus kicking off here with pawn to e4. Best by test. We get e5 in response. A Spanish on the board after bishop b5. Magnus yells vamos. And now we get a6. Hang about. Can't you take? Pawn recaptures. Win a pawn. Well, no. Queen d4's the trick. And you hit two things. Win it back. So instead, Magnus doesn't go for the exchange variation, retreats that sniper. Both ponies develop into the game. Ding does a little winnie. He hits the central pawn and Magnus just castles. Go on, take, I dare you. That's the open Spanish, but wasn't played here. The point is, you open the e-file, white gets pressure, wins the pawn back eventually. Instead, we see bishop e7, solid as a rock. Bishop c5, also a playable kind of line, but Magnus now goes d3, defending his center, preparing to actually win a pawn after killing the knight. So b5 played. You don't want to let that knight get deleted. The bishop dropping back, d6, both players do a little nod for the symmetrical three pawns there, and a4 now takes that tin opener to the queen side. Threat to take, win a rook. So bishop d7 connects these ones here, and now you can go c3, build the big white center. But Magnus goes with the horsey, both players stamping their feet, braying like horses. Arbiter has to have a word, and now we see knight a5. What do they say? A knight on the edge is a terrible loser with no prospects. Very common chess saying, but it does mean that Magnus has to drop to retain that amazing bishop, and now Ding gets to advance forward with b4, drive the knight and push that c-pawn, gaining space, clamping on white's expansion ideas in the center. But there's play on the light squares. Watch how Magnus masterfully goes to work. Starts with knight d2, looking at c4, preparing f4, and after castles, it's what we see. It looks like you're critically weakening g4 in this complex, but then knight c4 comes, and you open bishop to defend, and knight to defend, etc. So Ding plays a different move, but not a good move. He should go bishop e6. It's the best way to challenge this and look for d5 in some lines, c4 in some lines. Sometimes you even sack the c-pawn just to open up the square for the bishop to check, supported with a knight g4. Many amazing, interesting themes, but Ding was not familiar with the position. He goes rook b8 here, allowing Magnus knight c4, fine, not that you could stop that, but then he takes, bishop takes, pawn under fire. Again, you even have to go bishop e6 and find some nice lines with queen a5, giving the pawn, forcing the bishop back here, then taking, shattering the structure. All this ninja stuff, right, Ding wasn't aware of. Plays a5, ugly move, dodgy as this hat and clobber that Epic Cheese is wearing today, and now Magnus gets to take. Pawn recaptures and the pawns are stuck in the mud. There's no d5 break anymore, no c4 break. These are all on the dark squares. Ugly, miserable. Knight g3 now played. Excuse me. And Magnus is just in chess nirvana here. This is what he loves. Endgame with a small advantage. Queen h5. Look at those hoses just pressuring on the f7 point. And now we see knight d6. Attacking, defending. But the bishop takes up this amazing central outpost. e5 under fire. Bishop f6. Forced to protect the pawn, given the exclam because it's the only decent move, and now we see Magnus set up the old V-wing, light squared structure there, g6 from Ding, building the banana hammock, driving back the queen, then tucking this one into bed, but bishop e3. Magnus completes his development and he's doing it with tempo. Rook c8 meekly defends, queen f2 sets up the battery, and the silicon overlord even wants queen e7 here. give the pawn, just try and generate some play. But Ding clings onto it like a man in the storm, just getting battered on his boat. And now Magnus goes bishop g5. It's simple, effective chess. You can't play f6, the pawn is pinned, and there's a threat to go bishop e7, drive the rook away from the defense of f7, and then crash through. So that's why bishop e6. Ugly, but necessary. Opening the f-file now, fighting against those ideas. The queen scurries away. We see these two towers going into the blender, now all four towers, and Magnus has got everything to play for here. Look at the pawn structure, an absolute mess. So bishop e3 targets the c-pawn. Now we see knight f7. Ding meekly defending. He may as well just open his own creche. All he's doing is babysitting pawns. Queen f2 intensifies, and knight d8 now looks for knight c6 to d4. Lovely stuff, but there's a problem. Magnus fights back with knight f1. That pony visualization, which he's so good at, does in his spare time really come into fruition now, because he knows where the pony needs to be, watch the journey it goes on, and Ding can't even carry on with knight c6 here, because then the queen is blocked and the pawn drops. So he goes queen e7. Now knight d2, knight c6, but Magnus hits knight c4 just in time. It's a tour de horse. Now these pawns are under fire, so no time for knight d4 or you're dropping a pawn, right? So that's why we see h5. Magnus fights back, king g7, g3, and look at this. Ding just goes to shuffle town. Miserable. Nothing he can do. Onus is on Magnus to make a breakthrough. What does he do here? Excellent move. He pushes forward with Gary the debt collector banging on the door. Your rent's due, Ding. Takes was played, and now queen g3. Double attack, e5, g4. Absolute masterful work here. You're witnessing the GOAT. We see queen f6 covering, but bishop g5. Bye-bye queenie. Bye-bye pawny. Magnus does a gobble-gobble noise. Very delicious. Now we see takes with check, king h7, and queen f6. Of course, Magnus loves himself an endgame with queens off the board, but the problem, of course, is these pawns. They're absolute sitting ducks. They're on toast. So Ding, he goes for a decline of that one. King g3 played, preparing to gobble this pawn. And again, Stock Squid just wants c4 here. Explode the board, open the bishop, look for some play, and after c4, B takes can't be played, or this one drops, and if D takes, then E4 is weak. That's the kind of theme as well. But bishop G7, Ding just not finding defensive resources. Now we see another exchange offered. Queen B8 check declines, bishop F4, E5, yet another ugly pawn. This bishop's absolutely crying over here. Bishop F6 now threatened, so Queen B6 fights against it. Magnus switches back. I mean, this one is getting through more work than a pogo stick. Absolutely beautiful. The c-pawn's about to drop. Magnus hungry. Queen C6 played, but he just makes a mistake. I've done this myself in some blitz games lately, actually. I've noticed this theme. Sometimes you have to leave the queen defending important invasion squares. This is why the bishop should take. But Magnus takes with the queen here. Looks fine. What's the big deal? What's the difference? Well, now this queen slides here, you're getting an invasion. On f3, of course, if the king doesn't gobble, so it's what Magnus does. But no gobble-gobble noises at this point. He's now under pressure after queen f1. Ding's in behind enemy lines here, sniper at the gates, and now there's all these check ideas and perpetuals. But after king g3, once again, Ding Liren, reigning world champion, just plays an utter pile of rubbish. He goes bishop f6 here. He should start checking. Now the king can go here, check again, bishop f2. I mean, sure, me and you would miss this, but this is a reigning world champion. He should be spotting these ideas. Now bishop f6, threatening this. And it's not easy now for white to defend and stop these perpetual check ideas on the light squares. The computer says it's a dead level game. So that's how Magnus should have gone, or Ding rather. He didn't do it. He went the immediate bishop f6, but he now allows Magnus to do some checks and coverage. Magnus doesn't find the best move. Now still queen e2 is best, but queen h1 is played, and this is the nail in the coffin. Magnus starts checking, now checking from the light squares. He checks again, humming check out my melody, now brings the queen back to cover the king. Don't worry, honey, I got you. Great to be home. Now we see queen c1. Yes, Ding is about to gobble the queenside pawns, but at this stage, Magnus through to the king and running Harry the h-pawn. Takes with check. King g2, queen d2 played to cover h6, but it's a false cover. You can still do it. Magnus pushes forth boldly. This one now takes, of course, but Magnus takes simply. Bishop captures, and look at this. The bishop is about to go for breakfast. We see king f7. This one marches in, the pawn drops, and Ding resigns the game. Magnus about to win a second pawn. If you cover like this, fine, but round marches the king. And the problem is, this black king, even when it gets close, it can't even get in. This pawn's dropping. Okay, you can not swap the bishops, doesn't matter. You've got two extra pawns connected, running together. That's enough to win the game. So Ding Liren resigned here. Magnus takes it home, but just killing the guy. And every time they play, he destroys him, you feel. What domination from Magnus Carlsen. He won all his games today as well. Exceptional day for him. Hope you enjoyed this one. Check out the video on screen in case you missed the initial Magnus game I covered in this tournament. Really crushing, exceptional game. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.